You're 12 years old. Your name is Iltani. It's 1823 BCE in the city of Ur, and your mother is braiding your hair for the last time. Her hands are shaking. You don't understand why she keeps crying, why she whispers prayers you've never heard before. She tells you you're blessed, that the temple has chosen you for protection, that you'll serve the gods now. She doesn't look at your face when she says it. The priests arrive at dawn. They smell of incense and something else, something metallic you'll later recognize as blood. They lead you through streets you've walked your whole life, but everyone turns away. Your neighbor, the baker who always gave you honey cakes, stares at the ground. A woman you don't know spits and makes a sign against evil. You're confused. Isn't this an honor? The temple doors close behind you with a sound like a tomb ceiling. 7 other girls stand in the darkness with you. The youngest is 9. Her name is Šamaš-nuri, and she's holding cloth doll. A priest takes it from her hands and throws it into a brazier. She doesn't cry out. None of you do. You've already learned the first rule. Silence is survival. The high priest approaches. His breath reeks of wine and rot. He traces a finger down your cheek and smiles. You belong to the gods now, he whispers. And the gods are hungry. This is what really happened. We are war heritage, and here we do not look away. What we are about to tell you isn't mythology. It isn't a legend sanitized by time. This is documented history, found in cuneiform tablets, in temple accounting records, in mass graves that archaeologists wish they'd never opened. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, if you think the girls whose screams echoed through marble halls deserve to be remembered, support this channel with a like and subscribe. Because what happens next, they tried very hard to erase it. Let me take you back to Iltani for a moment. Before that morning, she'd been ordinary. The daughter of a grain merchant in Ur, one of the greatest cities in Mesopotamia. She had 7 siblings. She liked to watch the boats on the Euphrates. She was learning to weave. She had a future. Then her father's business failed. He borrowed money from the temple at 20% interest, standard for 1823 BCE. When he couldn't pay, the priests offered a solution. A mercy, they called it. Debt forgiveness in exchange for his daughter. Not as a slave, as something they called a naditu, a consecrated woman, a holy virgin dedicated to the god Šamaš. Her father was told she would live in comfort, spend her days in prayer, and be protected for life. The priests smiled when they explained this. They showed him the temple complex with its gardens and pools. They fed him date wine until he signed a tablet. What they didn't show him was the lower level. The naditu system existed across Mesopotamia for over 1,000 years. We have the receipts. The Babylonian temple archives at Sippar contain records of 1,847 girls accepted into temple service between 1900 and 1600 BCE alone. Their names are there, their ages, the amounts their families were paid, or in Iltani's case, the debts that were forgiven. Historian Rivka Harris documented this in her 1963 analysis of Old Babylonian temple economics. The temples weren't just religious centers. They were banks, agricultural administrators, and they needed collateral that couldn't run away. Think about that for a moment. What kind of collateral can't escape? Here's what makes this worse. These girls weren't chosen randomly. Temple records show specific requirements. Girls between the ages of 9 and 14. Virgins, verified by temple physicians in examinations that left some girls hemorrhaging. From families with debt or political vulnerability. Pretty enough to serve the temple's other functions, but not so beautiful they'd be missed by suitors. The examination scrolls from the Temple of Inanna at Uruk, translated by Dr. Samuel Kramer in 1951, describe the process in clinical detail. Girls were stripped, inspected for defects, measured, their teeth checked like livestock. If they cried too much during the examination, they were rejected. Compliance was the first test. Šamaš-nuri, that 9-year-old with the doll, passed. Her father was a soldier who'd been killed in a border skirmish. Her mother sold her for 6 shekels of silver, enough to feed her 3 sons for 4 months. The receipt survived. It's in the British Museum, catalog number me 92698. You can request to see it. The tablet lists her as one female child, unblemished, 9 years for service to Shamash, purchased in perpetuity. Perpetuity. That word appears in every single contract. Now here's what no one tells you about the naditu system. It wasn't about religious devotion. It was about control. When a girl entered the temple, she underwent a ceremony called the sealing, not a metaphor. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh and corroborating temple texts from Nippur, the girl's head was shaved. Her name was removed, replaced with a temple designation. Iltani became offering 347. Šamaš-nuri became offering 348. They were dressed in white linen that was deliberately too thin. Fed half rations for the first month. Temple accounting tablets from UR show exact allocations. 0.3 liters of barley per day, 1/3 the ration for adult workers. This was intentional. Hunger made them compliant, made them grateful for any extra food. And who provided that extra food? The priests. Dr. Jean Bottero, in his 1992 study of Mesopotamian temple hierarchies, identified at least 73 separate priestly ranks. Each had different access to different areas of the temple, but they all had access to the naditu quarters. The tablets are explicit about this. A temple administrative record from 1780 BCE, found at Larsa, lists the privileges of the priesthood. Number 17, translated by Professor Mark van de Meiroop, access to consecrated women for purposes of divine communion. Divine communion, the euphemism that covered everything. On Iltani's first night in the naditu quarters, she learned what protection meant. There were 47 girls in the dormitory, a long stone room beneath the main temple. No windows. One door barred from the outside. Stone beds with no mattresses. A single oil lamp. The older girls, the ones who'd been there years, didn't speak. Iltani tried to ask questions. A girl of 16, designation offering 289, pressed a hand over her mouth. When you scream, she whispered, bite your tongue. The taste of blood helps you forget the rest. At the second hour after midnight, the temple night watch records confirmed this timing. The door opened. 5 priests entered. They'd been drinking. The sacred wine made from dates and barley, reserved for rituals. They carried torches. The light made their shadows enormous on the stone walls. They chose the newest girls. They always chose the newest. What happened next lasted until dawn. The details are in a testimony. Yes, a testimony survived. In 1823, a French archaeological team excavating the Temple of Nana at UR found a clay tablet hidden in a foundation wall. Written in Akkadian, a confession by a dying priest named Edel Marduk, dated to approximately 1820 BC. He describes the practice he participated in for 17 years. He names 43 girls specifically. He describes their injuries. He describes the ones who died. He describes how they disposed of the bodies. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I'll tell you this. The tablet is stored in the Louvre, in a climate-controlled vault, in a section not open to the public. The curator I spoke with in 2019 said 5 researchers have requested access in 50 years. 3 withdrew their requests after reading the first column. Pause and consider what I just told you. These weren't rumors. This was written by a participant. But here's what makes this system even darker. The girls who survived the first year were moved to a different section of the temple complex. The birthing house. Because here's the part the temples didn't advertise. Naditu weren't actually celibate. That was propaganda. The reality is in the bones. In 2003, archaeologists from the University of Pennsylvania excavated beneath the temple of Inanna at Nippur. They found a cistern that had been sealed in approximately 1750 BCE. Inside were the remains of 117 infants. Carbon dating confirmed they died within a 50-year period. DNA analysis showed something horrifying. 63 of them shared paternal lineage with remains found in the priest's burial ground. The report, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2006, concluded that the temple operated a systematic breeding program. Girls who became pregnant were isolated. If they gave birth to girls, the infants were raised as future naditu. If they gave birth to boys, the infants were killed within 72 hours of birth. The reasoning was economic. Girls were assets. Boys had fathers who might claim them, might ask questions, might have legal rights. Temple accountant tablets from UR list infant disposal as a regular expense. Payment to laborers for digging pits outside the city walls. One tablet from 1789 BCE records payment of 2 shekels for disposal of 23 male offerings. 23. In a single entry. Let that number sit with you. Šamaš-nuri was 9 when she entered the temple. She was 11 when she became pregnant. We know her story because of another archaeological miracle. In the 1920s, archaeologist Leonard Woolley found a collection of personal tablets at UR, essentially a temple archive that had been abandoned during a fire. Among them was a medical log kept by a temple physician named Nabi Elishu. Entry from month 12, day 14, year 12 of King Rim-Sin. Offering 348, age 11 years 2 months, second trimester. Hemorrhaging during examination. Applied poultice of myrrh and copper filings. Fetus retained. Girl placed in isolation. Entry from month 3, day 7, year 13. Offering 348 delivered female infants at dawn. Significant tearing. Blood loss is substantial. The girl survived. Infant designated offering 401. Entry from month 3, day 22. Offering 348 infection of the womb. Applied hot iron. The girl expired at sunset. Body to potter's field. Infant to nursery. 16 days. She lived 16 days after giving birth at age 11. Her daughter, offering 401, would enter service at age 9. The cycle continued. Now here's what no one tells you about resistance. Some girls tried to escape. Temple records are very specific about what happened to them. At the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, a series of clay tablets catalog punishments administered between 1770 and 1760 BCE. The scribe was meticulous. Names, offenses, sentences. A girl designated offering 156 attempted to escape in year 15 of Hammurabi's reign. She made it 17 miles before being captured. Her punishment was recorded in painful detail. Public exhibition at the temple gate for 3 days. Hands bound above head. No food, no water. For the education of the populace and deterrence of others. 3 days in a Mesopotamian sun. Naked. On display. The tablet records that on the 3rd day, her skin began to split. Observers reported she'd stopped crying on the 2nd day. Stopped moving on the 3rd. She was cut down at sunset and returned to the naditu quarters. She lived. That was the point. Death would have been mercy. The punishment system was designed to be worse than death. Another entry. Offering 203 struck a priest who entered her quarters. Her sentence, removal of right hand. Cauterization with hot bronze. Return to service. She was 13. The tablets don't record her name, but they record the cost of the bronze and the firewood. 4 shekels. Archaeological evidence suggests these punishments were carried out in the temple's main courtyard. Public. Visible. Dr. Catherine Slansky, who studied temple architecture at Babylon and UR, noted that the courtyards were acoustically designed to amplify sound. Prayers, chants, hymns, all would echo beautifully off the stone walls. Screams would too. But here's what survivors of temple life reported in the few testimonies we have. The crowds that gathered didn't react. Merchants continued their business. Priests continued their rituals. Families bringing offerings stepped around the blood. A tablet fragment from Sapar, dated to approximately 1740 BCE, contains what appears to be a visitor's account of temple life. The author, possibly a merchant from Assyria, writes, witnessed punishment of temple women for insolence. The crowd showed no sign of disturbance. Even children watched without expression. I inquired of my guide, who explained this was common. The people have learned not to hear. The people have learned not to hear. That phrase appears in other contexts too. In legal records. In diplomatic correspondence. The systematic abuse of naditu was so normalized that it became invisible. Background noise in a civilization. What would you have done? If you lived in UR in 1800 BCE, if you saw this happening, if you knew what those temple walls contained, Would you have looked away too? Let me know in the comments, because here's the uncomfortable truth. Thousands of people did exactly that for hundreds of years. This wasn't one temple. This wasn't one city. This was a system that spanned Mesopotamia. Evidence of naditu quarters has been found at Ur, Babylon, Nippur, Sippar, Larsa, Uruk, Kish, and Eridu. Temple archives from these sites, cross-referenced by historians, suggest at any given time during the Old Babylonian period, between 4,000 and 6,000 girls were held in temple service across the region. 4,000 to 6,000, not across centuries. At one time, Dr. Rivka Harris estimated that over the 1,000-year span of the naditu system, approximately 150,000 girls entered temple service. How many survived to old age? Temple burial records suggest less than 8%. Because here's what this really was: an economic machine that ran on disposable girls. Temples in Mesopotamia controlled up to 30% of all agricultural land. They operated the largest lending institutions. They employed thousands of workers. And they needed capital that couldn't negotiate, couldn't inherit, couldn't leave. When a girl became naditu, any property she might inherit reverted to the temple. Any children she bore belonged to the temple. Any labor she performed, weaving, grain processing, beer brewing, belonged to the temple. And when she died, usually young, usually violently, her replacement was already being trained. Temple accounting tablets are explicit about the economics. A document from Sippar, dated 1765 BCE, lists assets of the Temple of Shamash. Along with fields, livestock, and silver, it lists naditu women, 217, valued at 4 minas of silver each. Total value, 868 minas. They itemize human beings like grain stores. 868 minas of silver. Using contemporary conversion rates, that's equivalent to 434 kilograms of silver, about $350,000 in today's values. Per temple, and there were dozens of temples. This is where it gets darker. Some girls grew old in the temples. Not many, but some. In 1854, British archaeologist Hormizd Rassam excavated a small cemetery near Babylon. Among the graves, he found one that puzzled him. A woman buried with honors usually reserved for priestesses, but the inscriptions were contradictory. The tablet at her grave read, "Offering 127, who served faithfully for 53 years. May Shamash grant her rest." 53 years. She'd entered service as a child and died in her 60s. Rassam's notes, housed in the British Museum archives, describe the skeletal remains, evidence of multiple healed fractures, severe curvature of spine, dental decay suggesting malnutrition, significant scarring on pelvic bones consistent with multiple difficult childbirths. This was the survivor, the one who'd endured 53 years and earned a burial with a marker. Imagine what didn't survive. The naditu system began to collapse around 1600 BCE, not because of moral awakening, because the temple economy collapsed. The rise of the Kassite dynasty brought new religious practices, new economic models. Temples lost their monopoly on lending. The value of human collateral decreased. The last reference to naditu in temple archives dates to approximately 1550 BCE at Sippar. A single line in an administrative tablet. Naditu quarters closed by order of King Agum II. Remaining women dispersed to textile workshops. Dispersed. That's the word they used. Not freed. Dispersed. Where do they go? We don't know. There are no records of reintegration, no stories of women returning home. A 1,000-year institution that consumed tens of thousands of girls ended with bureaucratic dispersal. And then nothing. By the time Herodotus visited Babylon in 450 BCE, the naditu were gone. But stories remained. Filtered through centuries, sanitized by time, the temples became centers of sacred prostitution, a practice Herodotus described as religious duty, where women served willingly, where foreigners paid tributes, where everyone went home satisfied. Hollywood loves this version. The sexy temple priestess, the sacred courtesans, the exotic Orient where sex was worshipped. They don't mention the girls who were 9 years old. They don't mention the mass graves. They don't mention the accounting tablets that listed children as assets. Let me tell you what happened to Iltani, that 12-year-old girl whose mother braided her hair one last time in 1823 BCE. We don't have a death record. Most naditu didn't get one. But we have something else. In 2007, archaeologists excavating the lower levels of the Temple of Nana at Ur found a small clay tablet in what appeared to be a hidden niche. Written in crude cuneiform, unpracticed letters, like someone who'd learned to write by watching scribes. It reads, "My name was Iltani, daughter of Nur-Adad, the grain merchant. I had 7 siblings. My mother's hair smelled like bread. I will die here, and no one will remember. So I write this. I was a person. I had a name." The tablet is dated by context and stratigraphy to approximately 1821 BCE, 2 years after she entered the temple. She was 14 years old. The tablet is in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, or it was. During the 2003 looting, it disappeared. We have photographs. Katalog number EM 127634. But the object itself is gone. Even her last act of defiance, her insistence on being remembered, was erased. Here's what keeps me up at night. The naditu system lasted 1,000 years. 40 generations. Thousands of priests participated. Tens of thousands of families handed over their daughters. Hundreds of thousands of people walked past temple walls and heard nothing. This wasn't the work of monsters. This was the work of ordinary people in an organized society. People who worshipped gods, who had laws, who built ziggurats that touched the sky. And they fed their daughters to an economic machine because debt was sacred and human life was cheap. We like to think we're different, that we'd see the horror, that we'd resist. But everyone in UR thought they were civilized too. The bones don't lie. The tablets don't lie. The archaeological record is unflinching. At Nippur, those 117 infants in the cistern. At Ur, the mass graves outside the city walls. At Sapar, the medical logs that recorded rapes like agricultural yields. At Babylon, the punishment tablets that valued bronze more than hands. This is not speculation. This is not an exaggeration. This is documented history. The girls who died in those temples deserve more than romantic revision. They deserve more than Hollywood's exotic fantasies. They deserve the truth, spoken plainly, remembered accurately. Iltani was a person. She had a name. So did Šamaš-nuri. So did offerings 156, 203, 289, 347, 348, and 401. So did all. 150,000 of them across 1,000 years. History remembers the ziggurats of Ur. It remembers Hammurabi's code, carved in stone, declaring justice for all. It forgot the girls in the basements. This is war heritage. We don't sanitize history. We don't look away from uncomfortable truths. If you want more stories the world tries to bury, stories that deserve to be told even when they hurt, hit that subscribe button. Because next week, we're talking about what Roman legions did to civilian populations during sieges, and why the textbooks call it conquest instead of what it really was. The truth doesn't need your permission to be horrifying. It just needs to be remembered.